Greed can be a powerful ally.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's topic will be quite interesting as part of it comes from the Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover. In the novel, Palpatine and Anakin discuss why he should have been chosen to hunt down General Grievous on Utapau. The novel is a great read and I highly recommend you guys check it out for yourselves, as it is only about $8 on Amazon. This book was used for part of what our fanfiction topic will be about, and the topic will be what may have happened if Palpatine had his way with the Jedi Council when it came to deciding which Jedi was going to hunt down General Grievous. Palpatine was surprised that the Jedi Council had not chosen Anakin for the assignment. The Chancellor was going to make sure that Anakin went with Kenobi on this very important mission. After making his decision, Palpatine would send Anakin back to the Council with his request. They would not be very happy when he arrived with the Chancellor's demands. The Chancellor has requested that I lead the campaign with Master Kenobi on Utapau.
Disturbing is this move by Chancellor Palpatine.
Regardless, we must obey what he demands. So it had been decided. The Chosen One would finally get the mission he had been longing for, a chance to end the war by destroying the cowardly droid leader once and for all. After reaching the Outer Rim planet, Obi Wan would fly down to the surface to meet with Utapauan leaders and talk about the Clone War and how it has come to their planet. Once Obi Wan had finished his conversation, he would send his droid and ship back to the Republic Venator to inform Anakin and Cody that they would commence the attack. Meanwhile, Obi Wan would continuously hunt down Grievous using the same beast he had used in the original timeline. By the time Anakin and Cody had reached the surface, Obi Wan had found the droid leader. Only this time he would wait for Anakin because surely the general was no match for the two mightiest Jedi generals of the Clone Wars. Cody would be leading the direct assault on the Separatist troops out in the open. The Separatist droid army would be taken by surprise. They had not expected an attack this soon and were caught off guard by the sheer size of the army that Kenobi and Skywalker had brought with them. The droids outnumbered the clones, but each clone equaled at least 10 droids. Cody and the 212th would push the droids to the brink with each successful battle tactic that Kenobi and Skywalker had conjured up. As Cody led the direct assault, Anakin would make his way to reach Obi Wan so they could face the droid general together and bring an end to the war. They were waiting for the right moment to strike when Grievous was most vulnerable. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi Council was making more decisions on who to send to which planet. There had recently been an attack on Chewbacca's home planet of Kashyyyk. Master Yoda had good relations with the Wookiees, so he would be sent. The Jedi were playing right into Palpatine's hands. They had sent 3 of their 4 most powerful members off of Coruscant, right where the Sith Lord was hiding. Although Palpatine could choose to attack now and take over the Jedi and the Republic, he would choose not to because he wanted Anakin as his new apprentice. And there was no way that Anakin would follow Palpatine if he came back to Coruscant and realized that Palpatine had killed a bunch of innocent Jedi and anointed himself Emperor of the Galaxy. So Palpatine would be patient and wait until the Chosen One and his old master had returned from destroying Grievous, because surely this was imminent. Sidious was never really fond of the droid general. He was merely just a tool in the ultimate grand plan of the Sith. Finally, Anakin had arrived just outside of the Separatist structure where Obi Wan had been hiding and waiting for him. Well, it took you long enough. It's time to bring this war to an end. Now on that, we can both agree. The 2 Jedi Knights would then pursue Grievous after they went inside the Separatist structure. Upon finding him, the droid general would tell all of his battle droids to leave. Being the arrogant droid general that he was, he would think that he could deal with Kenobi and Skywalker himself.
At last, a true Jedi challenge.
And this time you won't escape. Anakin and Obi Wan would ignite their royal blue sabers and engage the droid general. Grievous would do the same, igniting his 4 stolen Jedi lightsabers in a simultaneous motion. The general would start off his attack fiercely, but Anakin would meet his attacks with even more fierceness and power. Anakin and his old master complemented each other very well. Anakin would pursue a more offensive front, and Obi-Wan the opposite. After all, Master Windu hadn't called him the Master of Surisu for nothing. Obi Wan would deflect each and every one of Grievous's attacks, while Anakin would continue to keep him at bay with his Form 5 of offensive lightsaber combat, called Gem So. Grievous would have no chance to separate the two Jedi, so there would be no way for him to get to his wheel bike. Due to this, the battle would end much more quickly than in the original timeline, when it was just Obi Wan versus Grievous. The droid general continued to use the forms that Dooku had taught him. Unfortunately, none of his attacks would hit their mark. And suddenly, Anakin would use a double-handed force push to thrust Grievous back into a Durasteel wall, making the droid general's parts more vulnerable. Eventually, Obi-Wan would turn his defensive attacks into offensive ones. This would render the general defenseless and give Anakin the opportunity to slash two of the general's lightsabers out of his hands. Once again, Anakin would use a powerful force push to weaken Grievous even more. He would not be able to recover from this, and then Anakin would use his saber and thrust it through the droid general's heart, killing him and thus ending the Clone Wars. Or so the two Jedi thought. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi would be conversing among themselves in the war room. Suddenly, a hologram of Commander Cody would appear, and he would let the Council know of what had just transpired on Utapau. Yes, Commander? General Kenobi and General Skywalker have defeated Grievous. Should we continue our attack? Yes, the droid army will be lost and confused without their general. It will be much easier victory for you. Understood. Back on the same planet, Anakin and Obi-Wan would be leading their forces against the reckless and confused droid army. Their victory would be swift after a few hours of a full offensive attack. In the Senate, many would want an immediate end to the war. Unfortunately, Palpatine would manipulate them into believing that there were still many battles to be fought and won across the galaxy. He convinced the senators that these battles would be won easily without their commanding officers. And so the war would rage on until eventually every separatist-controlled world would be taken back and controlled by the Republic. After winning many more battles, Anakin and Obi-Wan would finally be able to return home. It had been several months since they had defeated General Grievous. At this point, Anakin's twins had already been born and Palpatine had not yet revealed himself to the Jedi. The Sith Lord's time was almost up if he was going to turn Anakin. Due to this, he would request Anakin to come to his office and have a chat. Before the Chosen One would do so, he would be prompted by the Jedi Council to spy on Palpatine and see if he would finally give up his emergency powers. Palpatine had long planned this day, but he had never expected that the war would last as long as it did. Due to this, he would not be able to lure Anakin with the fact that his wife would die of childbirth if he didn't learn the ways of the Sith. Darth Sidious had a very hard decision to make. After conversing with Anakin, he could either try to groom him with more susceptible ways that the dark side would prevail, which obviously likely wouldn't work due to the fact that his worst fear had passed and his new children were born and living. So due to these facts, Palpatine would choose his second option. This broken being had always lived in the back of his old master's mind, and would finally be of some use to the Dark Lord once again. Darth Maul had been promised the role he had once had alongside his old master. The two Sith would plan for Maul's Shadow Collective to infiltrate Coruscant and wreak havoc on the city. Once they had, Order 66 would be executed and the Jedi would be no more, or so Palpatine thought. Unfortunately, many Jedi would be killed after the crime lords had infiltrated the city, and also after Order 66 had been executed. Palpatine had chosen his timing very precisely. He had chosen this time because many of the Jedi would be returning back to the temple on Coruscant aboard their cruisers, so it would be a much harder deal to escape all of the clones aboard each ship. After many Jedi and innocent civilians had been killed, only the most skilled and powerful Jedi remained. Of course, this would include Anakin, Obi-Wan, Mace, Yoda, and almost every other Jedi Council member, as well as a few others who had survived aboard their cruisers. After the initial attack, Maul would lead his loyal Mandalorian followers into the Jedi Temple to eradicate the Jedi once and for all. Since there were only around 15 Jedi left in the temple, they would split themselves into 4 different groups. Once Maul and his troops attacked, Anakin and Obi-Wan, as well as all of the others, would fight fearlessly to become the victors, just as their Jedi ancestors were against the Mandalorians thousands of years prior to the Clone War. Of course, since Maul was obsessed with Kenobi, he would be the former Sith's first target after his troops had fallen. Suddenly, Obi Wan looked out of the corner of his eye as he slashed the last Mandalorian across the neck. It was Maul. After his double-bladed saber was ignited, the two adversaries would engage in a fierce battle. After all, the two had much hatred for each other. Anakin was nearby and could hear lightsabers smacking and swinging at each other. Surely Obi-Wan could use his help, but Anakin had his own problems to deal with. The leader of Maul's loyal followers, Gar Saxon, was one of the last Mandalorians left. Saxon was a great warrior and surely a match for any single Jedi. Unfortunately for him, the chosen one, Anakin Skywalker, was no regular Jedi. As soon as Saxon fired his blaster Anakin's way, the bolts of energy would easily be deflected, and suddenly Anakin would use a massive force jump combined with a force push that would thrust Saxon against the wall. Anakin would instantly become angry and tap into the dark side. Due to this, Saxon would rise into the air with his hands clasping at his throat, and before too long, the once legendary Mandalorian was no more. Anakin would immediately sprint over to where Obi-Wan was battling Maul. Obi-Wan was struggling against Maul. His brute force was continually catching Obi-Wan off guard, due to him using a substantial amount of his energy to defeat the clones and the Mandalorians that had attacked the Jedi Temple. Maul would catch Kenobi off guard once again, but this time, Maul would raise his mechanical leg and thrust it into the Jedi's abdomen. Obi-Wan would fall to the floor and suddenly be at the mercy of Maul. "Now you will suffer, as I have suffered. You will feel as I have felt for so long." Obi-Wan was bursting with pain. Suddenly, Anakin would fly out of nowhere and kick Maul out of Obi-Wan's way, saving his defenseless friend from death. Anakin was broiling with anger, and Maul would eventually pay for the price for messing with his best friend and mentor. The two would engage each other, each lightsaber swing becoming faster and more swift than the last. Maul would use his speed, but Anakin was faster, twisting and turning to deflect Maul's attacks and then turning them into offensive attacks. Their duel would rage on across the halls of the Jedi Temple until they would encounter the other Jedi that had survived. Mace and Yoda would quickly activate their sabers and help Anakin to dismantle Maul by slicing his machine parts off of what was left of his organic body. Fortunately for Maul, the two Jedi were not murderers, so he would be locked up in the Jedi Council chamber guarded by several Jedi that would stay behind the rest. After defeating and capturing Maul, the three Jedi would rush back over to Obi-Wan and take him to his quarters where he could rest and heal from his many battle wounds. Once Obi-Wan was safe and healing, Anakin, Mace, and Yoda would have some detective work to do. After scouring the temple archives and hallways for any evidence, they would stumble upon a small communication device that had been dropped. As soon as Anakin picked it up, he could determine that it was clearly Darth Maul's. The three would immediately take it to the analysis room. Eventually, they would trace several communication calls that Maul had made to Palpatine's office. This information would be very disturbing for Anakin to hear. He had finally discovered the truth to all of what had happened and transpired ever since he had been found by Qui-Gon on Tatooine. Palpatine had been behind everything, including the war. After discussing their course of action very briefly, Anakin, Mace, and Yoda would decide to infiltrate Palpatine's office and confront him about why he was communicating with Maul. The three Jedi would sneak through the city using civilian transportation and eventually make their way close to Palpatine's office. Upon arriving, they would easily take out all of the Chancellor's guards and security and finally make their way into his office. "Welcome, Master Jedi. I have been expecting you." And that, unfortunately, is an end of today's fan fiction. Please be sure to comment down below on what you think should happen in part 2, as I will be incorporating the comment that I think will best fit the story. Until then, I would like to thank you all for watching and obviously hopefully enjoying today's video. And as always,